Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. We continue with the Hardy Boys hunting for hidden gold. Chapter 7. In the Windy City. The Hardy Boys had never been on a long train journey before, and the trip, consequently, was replete with interest for them. As the train left Bayport behind and began speeding through the open city with its snow-covered fields, they felt a sense of elation and freedom. "This is certainly better than school," declared Joe, settling back to his seat with a sigh of contentment. "Sure is. Chet Morton and the rest of the gang will be just about sick with envy when they hear we've gone. I wish we could have them with us. When do we reach Chicago?" "Sometime tomorrow. Won't it be dandy to stay on the train all night?" They watched the scenery that seemed to flash past as on a moving scroll, while gradually twilight fell, and the lights in the Pullman were turned on. They went into the dining car, where they were served by a massive man with an air of an elaborate courtesy. The novelty of eating an excellent and perfectly served dinner, while speeding swiftly across country, appealed to them, and when they had finally risen to their feet and left a tip for the waiter, Joe was of the opinion that he could imagine nothing better than living this way all the time. "When I grow up, if I have any money enough, I'm going to live on the train," he said solemnly. "You'd soon get tired of it. Not me." And not until the novelty of the long journey began to wear off did Joe admit to himself that possibly such an existence might be wearisome in the long run. They slept the sound slumber of hearty youth, and were up early next morning for the first breakfast call. There, at their table, with its immaculate linen and gleaming silverware, they did justice to crisp bacon, golden eggs, and meanwhile, looking out the wide windows at the murky chimneys and dark masses of factory buildings as the train entered the outskirts of a large city. The train roared across viaducts, and they could see trolleys and automobiles speeding to and fro in the city streets in bewildering confusion. For the first time, they began to have some appreciation of the real extent of their country. "I guess Bayport isn't the only city in the state," said Frank with a smile. "It looks pretty small compared to some of these that we've gone through." But as the morning passed, they wearied at last of looking at the scenery, varied as it was, and toward mid-afternoon they began to be impatient for a sight of Chicago. When at last the train began to roar through the suburbs of the Windy City, as a friendly porter called it when they had failed to understand his reference to it as shy, they felt a mounting excitement. But the train rushed in past seeming endless rows of houses, and then past miles of industrial buildings, overhung with a cloud of murky smoke, until they thought the center of the city would never be reached. The journey came finally to an end. Their porter was on the platform with their grips. They tipped him for his service during the trip, and made their way down the crowded pavement, through the gates, into the concourse of the enormous station. There they gazed about at the bustling hordes of people, all intent on their own affairs, moving to and from the trains. The constant sound of shuffling feet, buzzing voices, clanging bells, all the varied noises of a great railway station, sounded like the roar of the ocean in their ears. They made their way outside and clambered into a waiting taxi, directing the driver to take them to the hotel their father had mentioned in his telegram. In a short time the car drew up at the entrance. After a brief ride through the crowded, noisy streets that made the main street of Bayport seem like a country lane on the Sunday afternoon by comparison, a bellboy seized their grips, and the boys presented themselves at the desk. The clerk glanced at their names after they had signed. "Ah, yes," he said. "Frank and Joe Hardy. Your room has been reserved for you." And there is also a letter, I believe." He reached into a pigeonhole in a compartment nearby and produced a letter, which he tossed over to them. He struck a bell smartly. "Front! Show these gentlemen to 845. Feeling highly important at being referred to as gentlemen, and at having a bedroom actually reserved for them in a hotel of such grandeur, the Hardy Boys followed a military-looking bellboy to the elevators, whence followed a swift ascent to the 8th floor, then down wide, silent corridors to their room, a substantially bright and airy room with a bath. It was all a revelation to the lads, who had never been in a big hotel before, and when they looked out the big windows down through the thronging mass of the city streets below, they were excited beyond measure. "First of all, we'll read Dad's letter," said Frank. "These are the instructions he promised, I suppose." He opened the envelope and read, "My dear boys, I could have given you all the instructions that were necessary in the telegram I sent your mother, but I thought it best that you come to Chicago first and have a little rest before resuming your journey. This would also give me a chance to tell you more about the mission I have decided to send you on. The truth of the matter is, I have been hurt, and am now laid up in a miner's cabin, and have been unable to continue my investigations in the case I have in hand. For this reason I am calling on you to help me, for I think I can trust to your abilities by reason of the assistance you have given me in other cases. I did not want to worry your mother needlessly, which is the reason I did not mention my injury. It is not serious, but it will be some time before I am able to be on my feet again, and in the meanwhile, time is precious. In my investigations, here I have discovered a secret concerning some stolen gold. It is this matter that I wish you to investigate for me. To do so, it will be necessary for you to come to Lucky Bottom, Montana at once. Have a good night's rest at the hotel, and then come on here. I am under the care of a miner by the name of Hank Shale, and when you reach Lucky Bottom, anyone will be able to tell you where to find this place. I shall be expecting you, so do not fail me. I hope you have a pleasant trip. Do not worry about me, as I am in good hands and progressing favorably. Your dad, Fenton Hardy." Frank put down the letter with a low whistle. "So that's the reason he called for us," he said. "Dad's been hurt. He says it isn't very serious." "It's serious enough when it means he's not able to be on his feet. Perhaps we ought to start out to him right away." "Not much use of that," objected Joe. "We wouldn't gain much time, and we'd be so tired when we got there that we wouldn't be of much use to him for a day or so. I think we'd better rest here tonight, as he suggested, and go on tomorrow." Frank considered his brother's advice sound, and after enjoying a good dinner, the boys went out and wandering about the busy streets for almost an hour, enjoying the sights of the Windy City. But it was a cold, bitter evening, and they soon sought the warmth and comfort of their hotel again, going to bed early, because they were tired after their long hours on the train. They were told by the information clerk that their train would leave at 11 o'clock the following morning. This gave them plenty of time for a good sleep, a bath, and a leisurely breakfast. When all their preparations for the continuation of the journey had been made, they presented themselves to the desk in the lobby to check out. Frank paid the bill, and the boys were just about to move away from the desk when a neat elderly man, somewhat below medium height, came up to him. "Are you the Hardy Boys?" he asked, glancing quizzically at them. "Yes." "I was told to be on the lookout for you," said the elderly man. "My name is Hopkins." "Who sent you, Mr. Hopkins?" asked Frank politely. "I'm your father's lawyer, that is, in Chicago," said the neat little man. "He sent me a telegram last night asking me to look you up here and do what I could for you." I have arranged for your transportation as far as Lucky Bottom. That's where you are bound, isn't it?" "Yes, that's the place." "Well, then," said Mr. Hopkins, "if you'll come with me, I'll see that your accommodations are ready for you. I made the arrangements with the railway this morning." Reflecting that they were certainly obtaining first-class service on their trip across country, the Hardy Boys accompanied Mr. Hopkins across the lobby and out on the street, where a taxi was waiting. The porter put their luggage inside, and Mr. Hopkins got in with them, directing the driver to the station. "Your father is an old friend of mine," said the lawyer, "and I am only too glad to be of service to his sons. I handle a great deal of his Chicago business for him." Although the Hardy Boys had not been aware that their father had a great deal of Chicago business, they were properly appreciative of Mr. Hopkins' kindness, and when they finally reached the station, he guided them through the gates to the train. They expressed their thanks for what he had done for them. "It's nothing," he said brusquely. "We can hardly look at it that way," replied Frank. Mr. Hopkins, absorbed in the details for the boys' comfort, did not answer. Instead, he turned and said, "Porter, how about compartment B?" "All ready, sir." "All ready," the porter assured him, leading them to the compartment. "All ready just as you asked, sir." "We're traveling in style," murmured Frank, nudging his brother. Chapter 8. The Second Stranger. Mr. Hopkins bustled about the compartment, making everything comfortable for the Hardy Boys and chatting affably. "You'll be looked after right until you reach Montana," he said. "You won't have to change trains. There'll be no bother." "We're very grateful to you," began Frank. The little lawyer dismissed their thanks with a gesture. "It's no trouble at all," he said. "No trouble at all. Your father would do as much for me any day." From out on the platform they heard the cry, "All aboard!" Mr. Hopkins glanced at his watch. "I'll have to go," he said quickly. Then, without waiting to say goodbye, he dashed out of the compartment, slamming the door behind him in his haste. The Hardy Boys settled back in the comfortable seats as the train began to move. They looked out the window as they emerged from the great train shed, and then they were occupied gazing at the city streets as the locomotive picked up speed and roared on its way. In due time the train passed through the outskirts of Chicago, and then it rushed on through open stretches of country, past little towns and villages. It was an express that evidently stopped only at the larger cities. "At this rate, it won't take us long to reach Montana," Frank remarked. "We're sure making good time. What do you say going out and sitting in the observation car for a while?" Frank suggested. "It's roomier than this compartment." "Suits me." Frank went to the door. To his surprise, he found that it would not open. He tried again, but the door refused to budge. "That's funny," he remarked. "We're locked in." Both the boys tried the door, but it was no avail. "The catch must have been on when Mr. Hopkins went out," Frank said. Even yet, the real truth of the situation had not dawned on them. They hammered on the door for a while, but no one heard them. At last Frank caught sight of the bell button. "That's stupid of me," he said with a smile. "I should have known there'd be a bell to call the porter." He pressed the button and waited. No one came. There was no sound but the roar of the train as it rushed on its way. He pressed the button again and again. "That porter must be either dead or asleep," he muttered, settling down to a prolonged ringing of the bell. After what seemed uninterminable length of time, they heard a shuffle of feet in the corridor. The sound of steps ceased, and someone rapped on the door. "Something for you gentlemen?" "Yes, let us out of here." The porter tried the handle of the door. "By golly," he observed, "you done locked yourselves in." "We didn't lock ourselves in." "Somebody locked us in. Haven't you got a key?" "Just a minute." They heard the porter shuffling away. After a while he returned with a sleeping car conductor. A key clicked in the lock, and then the door swung open. "How on earth did that happen?" asked the conductor, mystified. He looked at the porter accusingly. "Did you lock these boys in there?" "No, sir, no, sir," protested the porter. "I didn't do nothing about this. There was a man in Chicago, an older man, and he showed him the compartments, and that's all I know about it." "I don't think the porter had anything to do with our being locked in," explained Frank. "It was an accident. Our friend Mr. Hopkins slammed the door on his way out, and the catch must have been on without our knowing it. It's perfectly all right." "I got their tickets all right," said the conductor. "Yes, sir. I collected the tickets myself. The boys give 'em to me. The tickets to Indianapolis, sir." "To where?" asked Frank in amazement. "Indianapolis. But we're not going to Indianapolis." "That's where your tickets read to." The Hardy Boys looked at one another in consternation. "But we're going to Montana. Didn't Mr. Hopkins give you the tickets to Lucky Bottom, Montana?" The conductor produced some tickets from his pocket and glanced through them. "Even if he did," he remarked, "they wouldn't be any use on this train. We're bound south, not west. No," he concluded, "your tickets are here, compartment B, and they read Indianapolis." "We've been tricked," declared Frank hotly. "Mr. Hopkins said he had been sent to look after us, and this train would take us right through to Montana. And then he locked the door on you so you wouldn't go around making inquiries until it was too late," added the conductor. "Your friend certainly put one over on you, but I'm afraid we can't do much for you. We're quite a distance out of Chicago, and this train doesn't stop for another hour yet." "Another hour!" "That's the best we can do." "Well," said Frank disgustedly, "I guess we'll just have to wait and get off at the first stop, and then take the next train back to Chicago. This will hold us up another day on our trip." "Sorry," said the conductor sympathetically. "Of course it isn't our fault. We couldn't know you were supposed to be going west." "No, of course not. It was Hopkins. He planned the whole thing from the start." "Oh, well," Frank shrugged. "We might as well wait." He and Joe went back into the compartment and sat down. This unexpected development left them silent and discouraged. Too late now. They saw that the astute Hopkins had deliberately sought to prevent them from joining their father in Montana. He had worked the trick very neatly, and it might easily have happened that the boys would not have discovered the deception until they reached Indianapolis, had it not been for the chance remark of the porter. For that, at least, they were thankful. "Dad's enemies mustn't be very anxious to have us reach Montana, if they'll go to these lengths to sidetrack us," said Joe at last. "We'll get there if we have to walk," Frank replied grimly. They had no further enjoyment of the scenery. Each flitting telegraph pole meant that they were drawing further away from Chicago and losing so much more time in resuming their journey to the west. At length the train began to slow down, and looking out, they saw that they were approaching a small railway town with an immense water tank. The porter came to the door of the compartment. "Here's the first stop," he told them. "You can get a train back to Chicago from here." He took their luggage, and when the train came to a stop, the boys got out onto the platform. "Now I wonder how long we'll have to wait before we get a train back," remarked Frank. His eyes caught a bulletin board in front of the little station, and he went over to it. At length he found what he sought, a late train bound for Chicago, and he almost groaned as he noted the time. "There won't be a train along for 5 hours," he reported to Joe. "Good night. That means we've got to cool our heels round here until dark. 5 solid hours." Dolefully they confronted the bulletin board. A young man in a heavy ulster and tweed cap was also studying it. He glanced towards them. What's the trouble? He asked. Isn't there any earlier train to Chicago than that? The young man shook his head. I'm afraid not, he said. I guess we're out of luck. In a hurry to get there? Frank nodded. That's too bad. But say, the young man reflected a moment. If you motored over to Greendale, you'd be able to catch an earlier train. There's another railroad passes through there. If we can catch an earlier train, that's the train we want, said Frank decidedly. How far away is Greendale? And how do we get there? It's about 20 miles across country. I'm motoring over there myself right now. You're welcome to come along with me, if you wish. I'm just waiting until the line is clear, so I can put through a telephone call. Do you think we can make the train at Greendale all right? Oh, yes. I'm sure of it. There's a train leaves for Chicago in about an hour, and we'll be there in plenty of time. There's my car beside the platform. Put your grips in, and I'll be along in a few minutes. The young man went into the waiting room, and the Hardy Boys saw him go into a telephone booth to put through a call. Frank and Joe congratulated themselves on this lucky turn of events that had saved them from a dreary 5-hour wait, went over to the touring car, and the young man had indicated and put their grips in the back seat. In about 5 minutes, their new-found friend emerged from the waiting room. All set? He asked. I have made inquiries about your train, and you'll be able to make it all right. Hop in. He insisted that they sit in the front seat with him, as there was plenty of room. I like company when I'm driving, he said cheerfully, and this removed the last vestige of reluctance in the Hardy Boys' minds, as they had been slightly afraid that they might be proving themselves bothersome to the stranger. He was a skillful driver, and the roads were good. The big touring car sped along the highway, and they left the village behind, racing out into the open country. The young man at the wheel said little beyond an occasional remark about the weather and or the conditions of the roads. Not until they were at least 10 miles from the town did the boys have a suspicion that anything might be wrong. That was when the young man turned the car suddenly off the main highway down a lonely road. The car lurched heavily to and fro in the deep ruts. I thought you said the other town was on the main highway, said Frank. I know the way, retorted the man at the wheel gruffly. Something in his tone made the boys suspicious. Frank glanced at his brother, and he could tell by his expression that Joe did not like the situation either. Some distance ahead they saw an object, parked directly across the road. It was an automobile, and it effectually blocked their passage. Somebody wrecked, I guess, said their driver carelessly. He began to slow down. Frank, who was on the outside of the seat, groped under the flap in the door until his fingers encountered a heavy wrench. He was not going to be caught altogether unprepared. The car came to a stop. From around the front of the other automobile came 3 unsavory individuals, unshaven, with peaked caps pulled low over their foreheads. Now, said the young man beside them, suddenly whipping out a pistol, you'll just come along with us. He leveled the weapon directly at the Hardy Boys. And we will continue this book next Friday or Saturday. Thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.